FOS TV is brought to you by the Lion's Den. The Den always has been and always will be about enjoying family and friends in an environment steeped in Happy Valley tradition. So come back to the Den, the perfect place to recall old memories while creating new ones.
Mark Brennan here with another episode of our Joe Paterno press conference wrap, FightOnState.com. Joined this week on our tour of the beat writers by Ron Musselman of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So, Ron, we'll get right to it. I'll throw the question at you. What jumped out at you from Joe's press conference today?
Well, I mean, he continued to say he's going to go with two quarterbacks. And he said it's not a scientific thing when you decide to put him in the game. I got to feel, even though he didn't say it, that Anthony Farrah very well could be trying field goals this week. And they got to do something because it's just a disaster. 1 for 6, 2 blocks in 3 games. So that's the big things I got up. He talked about expansion, pretending first like he didn't know about it, and then said it was good for Pitt and Syracuse.
Yeah, it was kind of a strange feel to the press conference. He was back to not quite getting some of the questions. Somebody asked him about Moy, and he thought it was Roy. One of the more interesting parts is when he was talking about the quarterbacks. He said that Mac, quote, Mac, unquote, and the other guy, quote unquote, are so close that he has to play both. Last year he called Bolden blocker. This year he's calling him the other guy. So he's not really dialed into these coaches or to these players' names.
I think he's waiting for him to throw a touchdown before he knows their name, because Penn State is one of 3 schools in the country out of 120 that have yet to throw a touchdown pass, and that's a big problem. They got to get that snapped and get these guys going in the right direction. I think they need to play one guy and get this over with.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it sure does not sound like that's in his game plan now. I went into last week thinking that was a real opportunity against Temple. We knew Bolden was going to get the start. I thought if he could really get things going there, that was his chance to seize the job. He clearly wasn't able to do it. And as good as everybody talked about that Temple team being, Joe admitted that after the game he was disappointed. Players were disappointed in the way that Penn State won that game. Now, he obviously backtracked off that a little bit and said after watching film that he felt a lot better about it. I don't know what was really much better to feel about.
I wouldn't feel better about that. And the funny thing is, he gave Jay credit for that going for it on 4th and 1. Said if it hadn't been for Jay, they wouldn't have went for it. But after the game, Galen Hall and Todd Bradley both said it was Joe's call. So go figure. There's confusion in that booth too.
Well, and as usual, he doesn't say Jay made the call. He says Jay Paterno. We always joke, what must it be like at their family for dinner? Jay Paterno, can you pass the peas? Mary Kay, can you have the salt?
No, you got to call her Mary Kay Paterno. You got to use her last name. You can't just use the first name. But that's always been an uncomfortable thing. I don't know why they call each other by the first and last name. Jay says Joe Paterno. It's okay, we know who he is. Say Dad. That's who he is.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird dynamic. Something else that jumped out at me today, Joe arrived at the press conference in a pickup truck of all things. It pulled up right outside of the media room, but he did not have his cane. And when he walked in, to me, he had a little bit of spring in his step. He looked a lot better at walking in, okay? Now, what did you think when he was coming in?
I thought he looked a little more spry, but if you saw him going out, he was struggling. So it was. I still don't think he's going to be on the sidelines. I just don't think he can get out of the way. I know he wants to be on the sidelines, but I just can't see it happening. I mean, I think it would be precedent to put him on the sidelines.
Yeah, I said a couple weeks ago that I thought that, or last week as a matter of fact, that I think he's going to be in the press box all year. Maybe toward the end of the year I could see him coming off, but I think the issue today was you sit there for 35 minutes, however long it is, and that's you tighten up a little bit, and at his age, he clearly was having a little trouble getting out of there. And I could only imagine what it's like to spend 4 hours on the sideline.
Well, come to think of it now, maybe he's going to sit in that pickup truck on the sidelines. Maybe he was up here testing it today. Maybe that's why he came in that. Maybe that's how he's going to protect himself in the sidelines.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Just in terms of some other housekeeping, I asked about Stephon Green because I really thought not having Stephon Green hurt them against Temple. When Silas Redd cramped up, Beecham went in, but he just doesn't have that that explosiveness, that spark. And Green, to me, is a guy who did. Joe, that was the most he's kind of opened up about Stephon Green. He talked about how he likes him as a kid. His heart's in the right place. He just has these off-the-field things that he's got to get straightened up. It sounds like he'll dress this week, but I don't think he's going to play for a couple of weeks at least, which is too bad because, again, Silas Redd, to me, head and shoulders above everybody else, but to have another speed guy, I think it would really help him. It's
funny, like every week the parameters change on Green. He's either on the team, he's gone. For a while, I thought maybe we'd only hear from him him on senior day. They'd introduce him. But I think they realize they need him. I think he's going to be back sooner than you think. Joe says not this week or next week, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets in there and starts playing against like Iowa beginning of October, because I think they need him. Yeah,
and you could really see a lot of times, we crack jokes or have a little bit of fun about Joe not being straight with us about stuff. I think this one's bugging him. I think he really, truly likes this kid and wants to get him out there. But by the same token, Green was obviously arrested for purchasing alcohol for a minor, and there was some other off-the-field thing that hasn't become public that we got to be real careful tiptoeing around. But you can't just throw him in there and not punish him. So I think Joe's really struggling on that.
Well, I agree. And then he bought the alcohol for Dukes, so he was involved until he hasn't been playing either. But Dukes is just another big guy. I mean, when you have Beecham in there, it's almost like having Zordich in the backfield, the same two guys, because they're both lumbering. Beecham's a little quicker, but I think they really need to get Green back, because Red's good, but he cramps up. He's going to wear down with just getting all these carries.
Yeah, just some other things that came up today. Joe was asked about the struggles of the offense, and he kind of poo-pooed that, which I don't think is a very good sign. He talked about how good the opponents they played are. Listen, you've played one Division I AA or whatever they call it now.
Right.
You've played a great team in Alabama, and you've played a good team in Temple. That's not a great Temple team, folks. I hate to tell you. And now Penn State sitting there, you were rattling off some of the stats. I mean, they're sub 100 in the NCAA. I mean, and sub 100, above 100 the wrong way in terms of all these different stats.
Yeah, it's been horrible. The only thing that's been worse, I think, than the offense and the quarterback play has been the kicking game. That's the most pathetic kicking game I've ever seen. And I know Farrah had his share of problems. I mean, he had 2 alcohol-related incidents, didn't practice all during the preseason, suspended the first game. They got to get him back in there. He has to be the kicker, because Lewis just doesn't have it, and they can't keep wasting these opportunities. What if it came down to a winning field goal down there? He had any confidence in him? That's why they went. That's another reason they went for it.
Yeah, see, a lot of people are talking about getting Farrah in there, and I know exactly where you're coming from, but this guy's never even attempted a field goal in a game, and that's the one thing that would make you nervous. So now maybe is the time to do it. I mean, Eastern Michigan's coming in. No disrespect toward Eastern Michigan, but clearly they got blown out by Michigan, could not score against Michigan, which, is something new and different. Maybe this is the week that you do make some of these changes where a guy like Farrah can get out there. But we were talking about it earlier. I mean, Penn State has not had a guy be the full-time punter and kicker since Chris Barr in '75. And how easy is it going to be for Joe to break away from that trend?
Well, I'd say it would be tough, but having been an old kicker a long time ago, he kicks off Farrah. So it's not going to really change him that much. I mean, the fact that he kicks off, he's got to be better than Lewis. I mean, Lewis has looked scared. He's looked terrible. 2 blocked. I mean, it's just, and Ficken, you can't blame it on him. He had he kicked that ball really low, but it's a 49-yard try. But I think you got to go to Farrah. I think he has to be in there kicking this week. I think you got to get him in there, because you're going to need him in big games. And you say, well, maybe he'd be nervous, but he can't be any worse than Lewis.
Listen, at the end of the day, they have 3 scholarships. Lewis is on scholarship now. Ficken and Farrah wrapped up in their kicking game, and it's absolutely unacceptable for the disasters that we've seen. And I think Joe obviously realizes that.
They're also like 115th in net punting. Yeah. Their special teams are just atrocious. The one thing I thought was really good this past game, they put Moy in on the punt returns. I think he's going to be a real good addition there, because Devin Smith's just too small. He just can't get it done. Can't block anybody. So I thought that was a good move.
Yeah, I think they really have to readdress the entire kickoff return situation, too. I mean, Chaz Powell has shown he can do it against the lesser opponents, and maybe he still can do it against some teams. But Davon Smith, I mean, tripping over the 10-yard line against Temple, I'm still waiting for this kid to make a big play. Maybe he'll do it against the Eastern Michigan, but they got to get some people out there who are just more confident and ready to attack and not be slipping and tripping over yard markers.
I totally agree. And you look at Chaz Powell, he's got 2 kickoff returns 2 years in a row against 2 1AA teams. Then his stats against everybody else is like 4 yards a carry. It's not very good at all. So I agree. It would be a novel idea. How about hiring a special teams coach instead of 12 guys taking care of? That's why this is all in disarray. There's no doubt in my mind it's why it's in disarray. They need a special teams coach who focuses only on that. Because they were dreadful a couple years ago. It was costing them all over the place.
Well, not a lot of college teams actually have special teams coaches, but what they have is one person who oversees everything.
Right. Penn State's got like 8 guys overseeing. One guy handles kickoffs. One guy handles punt return. I mean, they got to specifically put one guy he might be like the defensive line coach. Put him in charge of that too. That's what they got to do.
Right. Well, the way you have Mike McQuarrie as receivers coach and recruiting coordinator, he could just as easily have somebody as whatever. I mean, you have 2 secondary coaches. Right. You have 2 guys coaching the offensive line. I mean, I'm sure one of these guys could do a good job. And I'll tell you who I would love to see do it is Larry Johnson. Even though he's in charge of the punt team and there was a block punt, to me, he'd handled the special teams, as I recall, earlier in his career, and I thought he kind of coordinated things. I thought they did a better job then.
Yeah, what's funny is with this Lewis, not only has he missed field goals, he also missed an extra point. I mean, those things are automatic. I mean, you look at 0 for 2 from 30 to 39 yards, and 1 for 3 to 40 to 49. You kind of expect that, but you got to be making them from 30 to 39. I mean, banging it off the upright. I think it's time to replace him. I do.
On a positive note for Penn State, the defense obviously came up big, gave up a long early drive against Temple, but then really played, I thought, just an outstanding game the rest of the way. Held Bernard Pierce in check, and then the key, and Joe touched on this today, causing turnovers, finally causing clutch turnovers.
Yeah, 3 turnovers in the second half, and that was good. They needed it. Zordich. I mean, Moudy's interception was really acrobatic if you see it again.
Yeah.
That was really a good play there, and defense did play well. I mean, Temple had 82 yards on the first drive, finished with 197. So Penn State did a really good job of bottling them up. I think the defense is fine. It's back. Still not getting the sacks, though. Not like they used to. But I think that's the only place you have to work on because the linebacker play is good and the secondary is pretty solid.
Yeah, and I this defensive line, to me, I think really has the potential to be something good. Devin's still just a beast. I mean, just ripping it up every week, doing it against good opponents, doing it against, weak opponents, doing it against the Temples of the world. To me, this guy has a chance to be, maybe, I'm not sure he'll be an All-American, but I think you're looking at another All-Big Ten pick on that defensive line.
Well, I think Jordan Hill's looked pretty good, too.
Yeah.
And, Crawford's been pretty solid in there for the most part. They keep going back and forth between Lattimore and Stanley, so it's hard to get a feel on that end. But I'm telling you, I think the defensive line's been pretty solid.
Yeah, I think Stanley's more of a speed rush guy, and they get him in there when they want to, almost like an outside linebacker. I know he's not standing up, but he can get around the edge a little bit quicker.
Use Maben, but he stood up. But in that same kind of role, you're right.
Yeah, so anything else jump out at you at the press conference today?
No, except Joe's not going to change anything. He's pretty much intent on he's going to stay with 2 quarterbacks. I have no idea. He said he'd like to get to a point where he'd pick one, but I don't see it happening anytime soon.
So that's all with Ron Musselman this week with Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Where can people see your stuff, Ron?
www.postgazette.com. I have stuff on there every day. Tune in. You can read it. Be good.
I appreciate it, and thanks, everybody. This is the Joe Paterno with the Fight on State Joe Paterno weekly wrap-up. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.